Fred took a deep breath and then closed his eyes, surrendering to the silence and to Anya's palms gliding over his shoulders and back. The tension that had weighed on him for days, that gray shadow quietly seeping into his bones and never leaving him even in sleep, began to ease under the weight of her gentle and sure movements. Every press, every soft slide of her fingers felt like a quiet embrace, a message to his weary body that he was safe now. Her touch was not merely physical relief, but an act of tenderness in which patient attention reflected, as if painting shade by shade the peace that had been denied to him. And as his lungs, for the first time in a long while, drew a breath unbroken by weight, he tilted his head back and opened his eyes, meeting her gaze, warm, gentle, full of that quiet love that always brought him back to himself. She leaned lower, resting her forehead against his, and kissed him, casually, almost accidentally, her nose brushing lightly against his chin. That small misalignment drew a brief laugh from him and a gentle smile from her, and for a moment, everything narrowed down to that tiny touch, that sound, that closeness. "Hey," she whispered, her voice a mixture of relief and concern, as though words were necessary to confirm what her eyes had been saying all along, that she was here, that she had him, that she hadn't lost him. "How do you feel?" He looked at her as someone who had just found his footing. Gratitude flickered in his eyes, deep and quiet, almost childlike, seeking nothing but acknowledgement. "Better," he said, his voice hoarse from silence. "Much better. As if someone finally returned my body and soul to me. And you, of course, always know exactly what to do with me." Her smile, gentle yet carrying that familiar light in her eyes, pushed away all of his gravity. "That sounded a little hot," she teased with a laugh. But beneath the playfulness lay the attentive gaze of a woman who expected honesty from him. "And it was supposed to sound like that," he whispered, wrapping his arms around her forearms and drawing her closer, as if without her, he no longer knew how to stand. "Just warming you up for later." "Oh?" She raised an eyebrow, laughter audible in her voice, though her eyes remained serious, as if waiting to unmask him. "Let's say my plan involves you, me, and zero clothes," he said softly, his lips grazing her skin and already warming her cheek. Her instinct answered before reason, her arms wrapped around his neck as if they had always belonged there. He kissed her gently on the cheek, slowly, carefully, and then whispered, "I love you." In her eyes, a flash of vulnerability appeared for a moment, like a window into a heart that had always struggled between fear and trust. "I know," she said, her voice trembling with tenderness. "I love you too, Fred." He watched her breathlessly, searching her face for something that felt like calm, a trace of the path to peace. "You know, sometimes this all feels like a dream," he admitted. "If someone had told me 5 years ago that we'd be here, together, like this, I would have laughed. And now it all feels like the only thing that has ever made sense." Her smile was the smile of a woman who knew how many storms she had endured to reach this moment. "Probably because I'm the only one who knows how to put up with you," she said jokingly, but in her gaze was the strength of love that required no perfection. She kissed him on the cheek and added, "You're a miracle. You don't know when to stop. And yet, is that jealousy I hear in your voice?" he asked with a smile, and she lowered her gaze, unable to hide what her eyes had already been telling him. That jealousy, wild and primal, was not insecurity, but a confirmation of belonging. She hugged him. "So you are," he murmured, smiling as he felt her hug around his neck tighten. "Very much." He groaned theatrically, feigning helplessness. "Okay, I can't breathe. I love you so much it hurts, literally." His act made her laugh, and she began to pull back, but he gently grabbed her wrist and drew her back. Her eyes shone under the soft light. "Don't be cheeky." "Why would I be? I was just speaking the truth." "No," he said, drawing her closer. "You only voiced your thoughts, and your body has been confirming them for a long time." She paused for a moment, then almost unconsciously lowered her gaze. A shadow of concern appeared in her eyes. "I didn't like the way those women looked at you during training," she admitted softly. "They looked at you as if you were a prize, as if you belonged to them." Fred smiled gently, almost wistfully. "I didn't even notice them. My eyes were busy with one woman only. I watched you, standing next to me, holding my hand. That was enough for me." Her hand slid up his neck, resting on his face, tender and determined at the same time. He tilted his head and kissed her. Not quickly, not greedily, but slowly, as one kisses someone they have loved in every possible version of the world. My eyes see only you, he whispered between their lips' touches. Her heart skipped a beat, and she felt her whole body tremble in his embrace. Sorry, it was silly of me to think that way, she murmured, shyly, yet with a warmth that wrapped around him like a soft cloak. Shh. His finger touched her lips, and she kissed it, first gently, then at the corner of his mouth, then his lower lip, her palms cradling his face as if holding everything she had ever needed. You don't want to be late for interrogation, she said softly, adjusting his hair above his forehead and looking at him with a gaze full of both concern and love. You know how impatient your detective is. Fred touched his lips again, then stepped back, holding her fingers one last time, as if he didn't want to let go. I'll try to hurry. I don't want to waste a single minute without you. Don't be silly, she smiled, tenderness flickering in her eyes. You'll have plenty of time to tell them every detail. Maybe you'll finally close that case. For a moment, he looked at her deeply, as if seeking confirmation of a promise he was yet to fulfill. Come back soon, she whispered. I will, my love. I promise, he replied. And this promise, this time, felt stronger than anything he had ever said. As he walked out of the bookstore, he still felt her fingers on his neck. After the door closed behind Fred, Anya stood motionless in the center of the room where the pea still carried his scent, a mixture of fresh soap, skin, and something that was uniquely him. That scent was like a bubble, like the safety that nothing else could provide her. And then, when it faded, the silence became louder than ever. She let out a deep sigh, as if trying to dispel the emptiness that had settled in her chest. It was the kind of emptiness left by a loved one's absence, even when you know they will return. She reached for his mug on the table and pressed her palm where his fingers had been. The warmth seemed to linger, held there like a talisman in her hand. Then, almost mechanically, she returned to her work. Books, her old sanctuary. Under her fingers, the covers rustled, and lines from novels she knew by heart swirled through her mind. But now, she could not assemble them into a whole. Something inside her was scattered. Her heart raced faster than it should. The boxes that had stood against the wall for days now seemed to watch her, reminders of obligations she had postponed. She began unpacking them, sorting the books by genre, size, and condition. Her fingers glided over yellowed pages, over hard and soft covers, yet her mind wandered far away. And just when she thought the rhythm of the day might stabilize, when she believed peace would last at least until evening, everything changed. In the distance, she heard a noise. At first, vague, like through a dream. Shouts, voices, boots echoing on the pavement, explosive crashing. She did not move immediately. Doubt settled in her heart, and her body tensed in that old reflex, one that never fully left. Suddenly, she could no longer see the bookshelves. Instead, a face appeared before her, leaning over her, causing her to jerk in shock. Now she lay on the floor, while someone roughly twisted her arms behind her back, eliciting a painful cry from her mouth. Her body recoiled from the cold concrete beneath her. A warm hand gently touched her face, and Anya met a pair of concerned, dark brown eyes. She recognized the face, but her mind was sluggish, unable to process all that was happening. The lips moved before her. She tried to understand the words, but they passed through her awareness like disconnected sounds. Detective Lewis, the owner of that familiar face, turned from her and began shouting. The boot sounded again, heavy, around her. All she could do was look straight ahead, into the darkness of their uniforms. She wanted to cry. As she strained to lift her cheek from the cold ground, Lewis's eyes met hers, and what he saw on her dusty face was anger. Am I under arrest? Anya whispered, her voice breaking as it passed through her throat. She was anxious, fear growing by the second. Her mind frantically searched through memories, trying to find what she could have done wrong, but she could remember nothing that could connect to this terrible situation. She had to get up. She couldn't just lie there. She had to fix things. She thought of Fred. Why wasn't he here to stop Lewis from taking her? She called his name, but he did not come. She called again, unwilling to lose her love, his trust, and most of all, her life. It was then she realized how exhausted she was. Strength had left her, replaced by coldness. She began to shiver, as if even her blood was turning to ice. She needed sleep. Perhaps she was dreaming, hoping she was dreaming, and that when she woke, everything would be as it should. A sudden sharp pain in her side tore her from the illusion. She opened her eyes sharply and groaned when she saw the man beside her, kneeling and pressing hard against her side on the cold concrete. She tried to move, to escape the growing pain that burned like fire in her back. Louis appeared again before her, and her gaze seemed to pierce his very soul. At least he no longer looked angry. Now he was concerned. He knew he was the reason she lay there, suffering, terrified. Anya Woodberg, you are officially under arrest for the murder of Ryan Woodberg. You are not required to speak or do anything, but if you do, it can be used as evidence against you. You should not answer any questions without an attorney present. Her head spun. The world seemed to collapse around her. Everything was jumbled, unclear images, shouts, crashing, scattered clothing in the house and yard. But it had been years ago. Then her father had still been alive. Now she heard a police officer shouting, Louis's quiet, soothing voice responding, but she couldn't discern the meaning, only the tone, which unsettled her, until she heard someone calling Fred's name. It was another sound, one that had been going on for a while, and had begun to irritate her, tearing at her nerves. It was a cry, like an animal in pain, and it echoed in her, despite Louis's voice and the hand stroking her hair down her back. She was shocked to realize that the crying came from her own mouth. Even more disturbing was that she could not stop it. Her eyes grew heavy, but she fought against the exhaustion overwhelming her body and soul. She knew she had to stay awake, but it was so difficult. She fought for every breath, as if a tremendous weight pressed down on her chest, slowly suffocating her. The urge to cough became unbearable, and when she finally gasped and gave way, she immediately regretted it. A wave of pain swept over her, as if she might lose consciousness from the intensity, and the sensation of suffocation was quickly replaced by a terrifying feeling of drowning. Suddenly, Louis was gone. In his place stood a stranger, and she felt lost without him. The only familiar person in this nightmare was him. Only then did she realize her hands were cold and empty. The stranger tried to get her attention, shouting, but Anya ignored him. Fred's name escaped her lips again. It was not difficult for the officer to lift her, but she tried to regain her balance, to stand on her own feet. The struggle to stay awake grew harder, her eyelids heavier. Suddenly, she screamed in pain as they shoved her into a police car, its rotating lights flashing in circles. But even that pain began to feel distant, as if it no longer belonged to her. She felt herself sinking, and with her last strength, she managed to open her eyes and saw the blue sky. Her beautiful, clear blue sky was there. A tear slid down her cheek and disappeared into her hair, tickling her ear. And then the blue vanished, and the last thing she saw before her eyes closed was the cold, white, metallic roof of the police vehicle and the image of her daughter running safely into her father's arms. To be continued.